Welcome to This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. I'm Kent Justice, and our focus in this episode is the stadium of the future. That's what the Jaguars call it. Our guests today are experts on this topic, by the way. Rick Mullaney, the founder of Jacksonville University's Public Policy Institute, worked for multiple administrations in the city of Jacksonville as chief legal counsel, also as the chief of staff at one point. Mike Weinstein, former state representative here in Florida, a couple of terms at the beginning of the 2010s, I guess. And chief financial officer. And then what's happened in the most recent iteration of administration and the city government. For Donna Deegan, you've been the chief negotiator on this project about the stadium. So that's where we want to start here. And I kind of want to go deep here. I want to hear Mike Weinstein, the experience, the process, the ins and outs as much as you can about this. So more than a year ago, there's a campaign for mayor going on. And we know that one of the big topics, Rick and I are asking guests all the time, what are you going to do about this stadium deal, because the Jaguars need a new stadium? How do you feel this process has gone? And it's been almost a year that you've been deep involved in it.
It's been quite a while, right from the beginning, about 10, 11 months. And it's gone very well, much better than the first one that we did with the Jaguars when Wayne Weaver got the team.
This is 30 years ago you're talking about?
30 years ago. Right from the beginning, it was very obvious that the Jaguars would like to stay here. They've been here long enough where their staff is very entrenched in the community. No one wanted to move. And they had a vested interest in making the deal not only appear to be fair, but to be fair in reality. So we had all along the idea, how could we do it in a way that it works out financially reasonable for both, but the community perceives it as being a fair deal. So that was always in the back of our minds. The decisions that we made, how could we present that decision in a way that it would be well received? And I think it worked out pretty well. The current lease that we have had been amended 15 times, and not usually into the city's benefit. So the new lease compared to the old lease is a much improved document. The Jaguars will be involved in helping to pay for the operations, helping to pay for the capital improvements. They'll be helping to pay for game day. They'll be helping to pay for things they haven't paid for at all in the first 30 years that they've been here. And the split on the finances to do the whole stadium is relatively one of the lowest of our peers around the NFL league. And we got basically a good deal all around, I think. Council's going to look at it. They started to look at it. They'll continue to look at it for another week or two, and we'll see how they perceive it. But so far, the community has perceived it very well. There was basically a public hearing last night. About 50, 60 people spoke. About 55 of them spoke about the community benefit agreement, and about 5 spoke about the deal.
Yeah, that's been a perception. Rick and I have talked about this too. The stadium, the renovation, that seems to be sailing through, and then lots of conversation about the CBA, which we can get to in a moment. Rick?
You know, Mike, it seems like 30 years ago, the deal, it was successful, but it was very contentious. This time, successful, at least bringing it up for a vote. But it does seem that it's been constructive, less contentious. Is that your sentiment? And if so, why? Why have these negotiations, the dynamics in these negotiations, been somewhat different than 3 decades ago?
Well, a couple of reasons. Most, the people at the table were new to the idea. I mean, you had Wayne Weaver and his council. They hadn't done a deal before, basically. You had the city, basically pretty new, never done a deal like this before. So everybody was feeling their way and making some mistakes along the way and being a little bit tentative in making decisions. Plus, you had a very different press. If you look at the different industries that have changed over the last 30 years, the press has been one of those industries that have changed substantially. The investigative reporters, the I gotcha 60-minute type of strategy. So it's much more accuracy that press looks for now rather than gotcha. Yeah. So it was a much more pleasant experience this time for a number of reasons. Again, mostly they've been here about 13 years, the Jaguars, so they really knew about the stadium. They knew about the other teams. Wayne Weaver didn't know about any of the other NFL teams. He was brand new to the league. So we both came, and I was experienced not only with the Super Bowl, so I had NFL experience as well. So we came to the table much calmer and much more experienced and had a better product.
Can I ask on the deal itself? I want to ask a question on the deal. When you take a look at it's the biggest public-private partnership in the history of our city. And you mentioned comparable deals, like, for example, Nashville and Buffalo recently. How about the terms of this deal, and how would you compare them to, say, Nashville and Buffalo?
Well, every deal is a little bit different. Some of the other opportunities around the country had states involved.
Yep.
You know,
And the state of Florida prohibited really from funding for private stadiums or public stadiums in this case, right? There wasn't an opportunity for Florida lawmakers to say, yeah, we'll kick in a few $100 million.
There was the first time.
Right.
The first time we got $2 million a year for 30 years. But that's when you first bring a professional team here. Florida really can't do very much. They have so many professional
Right.
teams. If they help one, they have to help the other. So they were never a part of the puzzle. So we were in it on our own, and the Jaguars knew that. So they weren't looking for us to put in the highest percentage of any other deal. They were really looking for us to put one of the lowest, if not the lowest percentage into the deal. We talked about a new stadium. We talked about some things, but the Jaguars and the city felt it was a little bit beyond our finances to go $2.5 billion. We felt a really substantial first-rate $1.5 billion renovation was something that we could do and they could do in a shared way. So we came out very well, but each deal is a little bit different, but within the parameters. All the NFL owners have to agree to any new lease. 75% of the owners have to agree to what the Jaguars bring in. So they're not going to allow a team to go way out of the parameters, because next time it might be another owner that has to deal with this precedent out there that they don't want to deal with. So all of them are pretty tight, but I think we got one of the best deals in the long run.
Yeah. How did your experience, Mike, in that 30 years ago, and then helping bring the Super Bowl to Jacksonville, how did all that experience play into what a lot of people are going to say is a lot of success in this negotiation with the Jaguars?
Basically understanding the NFL business structure, where, you know, there's a lot of different professional leagues out there. They're all structured differently. No league is structured as well as the NFL to be successful, to keep all the teams relatively even. They share in the biggest revenue stream, the TV, where some of the other professional leagues, they don't share equally. So your smallest market and your largest market get the same share, basically, of the TV market. So that helps keeps it even. But understanding how influential the league is and their rules and regulations that each team has to work under was very helpful. So we knew the parameters of how far we could go and what we could ask for and what we could expect. And knowing they have to go to the league for their approval as well. We had multiple audiences. We had the mayor has to agree to it, council has to agree to it, the public has to agree to it, the Jaguars have to agree to it, and the NFL does. So we had 5 different vetoes that could have stopped this. So knowing that at the beginning, you sort of set your boundaries of how you can work in, and that's what we did.
You know, it's been interesting. You talk about the deal itself, $1.4 billion on this, we'll call it the stadium deal, and separately, over and above that, the $300 million for the community benefit agreement. But the $300 million seems to be getting a lot of the attention as opposed to the actual deal itself. How about describing and explaining the community benefit agreement, its pieces, and maybe help also describe why that's been the subject of such discussion?
Why it's important, as we hear council saying, maybe we'll take parts of that out when we vote on this stadium agreement. We'd love your perspective.
Well, right from the beginning, the Jaguars and the mayor wanted to do more than just a stadium. They both felt that if all we had was a stadium renovation, we missed an opportunity to do something more substantial. The Jaguars right up front offered that they'd put in $100 million over 30 years to do a few things. They're very interested in their neighborhood up north, out east they call it, neighborhood going north from the stadium. They're very interested in the park structure in downtown. As you know, Con has already had the highest private investment in downtown in 4 seasons. The stadium will put him over $1 billion in downtown investment. So he wants those parks finished. He wants Mosh to come up. He wants those things to really, be a priority for tourism and what have you. And plus, they wanted to do something countywide. Mayor was interested in workforce development, affordable housing, homelessness initiatives, and the parks as well. So we said to the Jaguars, if we'll come in and make this even more substantial, if we put in 150, will you go to 150? And they said, yes, if you'll do these things. So we said, okay, now we have a $300 million pie. Let's figure out how to deal with it. And what we put in it is to finish the funding so we could open Riverfront Plaza, which is the landing park, Metro Park, what they call Shipyard West Park, which is near Mosh, and make the flex field more usable. Get a floor in it, do tournaments in it, use it for exhibits and what have you. Plus, do workforce development, affordable housing, homelessness initiatives, and really do something for the out east community. They wanted their 150 to be split in two ways: 75 million going to out east, 75 million going to countywide workforce, homelessness, and affordable housing. So we put our money basically distributed in the same fashion. So we've got some real strong initiatives. The council sees it as sort of discretionary. I mean, they can't mess too much again with the lease and still have it be acceptable to the mayor, acceptable to Jaguars, acceptable to the NFL. But in the community benefit agreement, our 150 million, they basically have to agree to. So they're talking about some novelties. What about, other areas, Durkeeville, Springfield, what about other areas? Although out east is very unique because of its location, its history, and what have you. And it's going to be part of that economic engine, that corridor going north up A. Phillips Randolph. So it turned out that the Jaguars in the city are very, very comfortable with what we presented. Part of the complication is not only some council members wanting to make adjustments, but also some council members may have a conflict. Some of them do nonprofits, and some of them are in business that may end up benefiting for a piece or two of the community benefit agreement and make it so they couldn't vote on it. And if it's embedded in the lease, then they couldn't vote on the lease. So there's been some discussions about separating, like they do in the budget. They take the chamber out, they take some nonprofit stuff out of the full city budgets to allow everyone to vote on the budget, and then not be able to vote on the small pieces.
Individual members would recuse themselves from that
piece.
Sliver of the pie that we're talking about.
That's sort of the discussion, and it'll be Thursday and Friday. We're going to go over the construction development agreement, we're going to go over the lease, and we're going to go over and discuss amendments Thursday and Friday, and then again next Tuesday. And you're going to see a lot of discussion about adjusting that community benefit agreement. You'll see a lot of amendments from the auditors. We got over 200 questions from the auditors on all these documents. All these 8 documents that go along with the lease. Legitimate questions, but so there'll be words changed, there'll be some detail put in to make it more clear. So we're in for a heck of a 3 or 4 day session with the council to see if they can get it out sometime next week.
Do you potentially see 2 separate votes?
I think most likely. It seems like what Council President-elect Randy White offered last night was to take some of the CBA out and leave what you still can leave in and not have the conflicts. Just take out the piece that could develop conflicts. So we could possibly vote on all 8 documents, CBA being one of the 8, but pared down, and then have a separate ordinance come back with the piece of the CBA that had been carved out. That could very well happen.
I'm curious about terms when we talk about this $1.4 billion, and the city is going to be borrowing to put that money in as well. So when I buy a house for $100, I'm not saying it's $100, and I know I'm going to pay interest on this. And municipalities get better interest rates than Joe Blow consumer, right? So what does that interest rate look like, and what is the total cost going to be over however long a time this is to pay it back, 30 years or
the interest rates are beneficial to government because they're tax-free and what have you, but they're not there's not as big a gap as there used to be, because not only has private interest gone up, but so has government. Okay. Maybe the gap is still kind of attractive, but it's a lot higher. Instead of 1.5, 2, 2.25, it's more like 4 3/4, 5. And some of the debt will be long-term, some of it will be short-term, depending upon our operating budget as it grows. But the stadium is going to be built over the next 4 years, really 4.5 years, with the bulk of the construction in January 27 to August of 28. So that borrowing is still major 4 or 5 years down the road. And we'll see how the rates are. We'll see if how long-term we should go out.
There's a hope that those rates will be a little lower than they are today.
And it depends upon how we are as an operating budget. Maybe we can pay for some of it out of cash and borrow less. A lot of those decisions will be made, but closer to when it really is needed to be.
So practical question for the fans during that timeline and during that construction phase. What about the fans, and where will the games be, and how many fans will be able to attend?
Well, this season will be regular. The next season, 25, will be regular. The 26 season will probably be maybe 40, 42,000 in attendance, not more than that. The upper decks probably be basically down, not down on the ground, but not be usable. The 27 season, that's the 26 season. The 27 season will probably be either in Gainesville or Orlando. And then the 28 season will be back here. So we went far and beyond what we thought we would do to try to make it just a one season away. It adds to the complexity of the construction, because construction is going to start in February, March of 25. We start in the perimeter with columns all around that the roof sits on. And the roof will be, you can see through it. It's like sunglasses. You can see through it, but you're in shade, but light comes through. So it's going to be
for all of us fans who have sat at a game in the sun, in the heat.
Right.
Thank goodness.
By the way, Ken, as a historical note, certainly Mike was a big part of this and remembers it well, but there is precedent for games being played somewhere else. Back in '93, of course, when we were awarded the franchise, you had the Florida-Georgia game, and when they had to do the stadium renovation, you had University of Georgia playing in Athens, the University of Florida playing in Gainesville, and then it returned to kick off the summer of 1995. There was no issue there with Jaguars playing at that time. But so City does have some experience in that. And down the road, of course, it turned out to be pretty beneficial. The Gators and the Bulldogs love the new stadium. Hopefully they'll feel that same way.
They've been involved, and I'm glad you brought it up. They've been involved in every decision. They know exactly what we're doing, and they're anxious to start renegotiation after it's totally approved by everyone for the 28 season and beyond. I've been in touch with both athletic directors, and the Jaguars have been in touch with them, and they are on board, very excited. The capacity comes down. It'll be about 72,000 for Florida, Georgia, and it'll be built in. We don't have to build temporary seats and what have you, but there'll be a lot of premium seats available that aren't available now.
Yeah, so when we talk about construction, one of the things that Rick and I were tossing back and forth, I'd love to hear you talk about it, cost overruns. This negotiation included who's going to pay if the project comes in over budget.
A key point right from the beginning, we talked about it at the beginning, they accepted the responsibility as they have when they did Miller Electric and some of the other projects. And all the projects that have been done here have had overruns, and the NFL team efforts around the country, most have overruns. So that was a big piece of the puzzle. It was important for us to get that from them. And that brings me to another point. As elements of the community look at the deal, they may not agree with this or that, but it's all tied together. I mean, to get them to do the overruns, maybe we had to give here and there, and to get, everything is tied together. You can't just look at one piece and say, well, this was terrible, without knowing what happened to get that or to give that up. What did we get over there? But overruns is huge, and we're locked in as a cap, and we share if for some reason supply chains get better and prices come down and there's a savings, we split the savings between the Jaguars and the city.
Yeah.
Well, I'd violate the rule on a piece of the agreement because I think it's a very significant improvement over 30 years ago. How about talking about game day expenses, how significant they are, and what this lease provides on game day expenses?
One of many changes and improvements to the lease. Right now, the lease that we're under now, 100% of the game day expenses are on the city. It's over maybe $7.5 million a year each season. We front that. Included in that is security and everything that happens inside, all the elements inside. The new lease has us just responsible for security, which is about $1.5 million of the $7.5. The rest the Jaguars are taking over totally. They wanted to control it. They were willing to pay for it, which is a big savings for us. Plus, they're going to put in to help operate it. They're going to put in to help capital improvements, none of which they're doing now with the current lease. So they're involved, much more of a partnership, and that's why we tried to get the stadium into a 50-50, 55-45 payment, because throughout the lease, even in the construction process, there's at least a dozen places where we're partnered and it's 50-50.
Mike, it does seem to me that over the last more than a decade with the Jaguars, that these negotiations have been done in a very constructive way. And on the cost overruns issue, whether it has been at the scoreboards or whether it's been Daly's Place and now this agreement, that there's been a lot of back and forth, give and take, and the Jaguars willing to take on those cost overruns and to have some terms that, quite frankly, are pretty favorable to the city.
It has been relatively pleasant. I mean, we had lots of issues that we started off at two ends of the spectrum. but we came to nice compromises on many things. But it goes back to the beginning. They not only wanted a deal that they felt good about, but they wanted a deal that the community would accept, that they didn't take advantage of us. And that has always been in the back of their mind as well as the back of our minds as we proceeded. Yeah. It's been a good process. If you can say anything of this consequence, and anything that's a 330-page agreement is a pleasant process, but I think it was as pleasant as it could be.
I'm curious about this. Paint the picture, and whether you use names or not, it doesn't matter to me. But what did those negotiation sessions look like? Hey, we're in a conference room. The Jaguars got 25 lawyers. Now, what did this look like? Was it smaller than that?
The first meeting we had, we brought our two or three from the general counsel's office and some from the outside attorney firm that we hired. And they brought theirs. In the first meeting we had, there were 14 people in the room. 13 of us were lawyers. That's how it started.
Who was the non-lawyer?
I think Mark.
Mark Lamb?
I think.
President of the Jaguars.
I think.
Okay, all right. By the way, you two both have JDs from University of Florida.
Yes,
is that right?
I'm very fortunate. Very fortunate.
So 2 out of the 3 people sitting at the table.
I went to law school. He didn't believe it, but that's a different story. That's a different story.
I didn't think it could be done the way he did. He was amazed.
Yeah, he kept saying, I can't do it. But a variety of ways. Sometimes in Zoom calls with all the lawyers, sometimes just the lawyers, not Mark and I. Mega was a huge part of it. Mega, who's their general counsel, Jaguars general counsel. It got the last month, maybe Mark and I were either together in the same room or on the phone multiple times every day without others. I mean, it was all a combination. But we had lots of lawyers writing lots of documents, and it was one thing to come to agreement with all the terms, the financial terms. It was another to get a whole group of lawyers to agree on how it's being written and all the nuances in the writing. That took longer than to come to the terms on the agreements. But it was a challenge. It was basically, somebody would ask me, I felt like a conductor, where there were lots of, I wasn't doing anything other than trying to make all these pieces fit. And there were 24 people working very hard to make this all come together with different pieces of it. And it was a great learning experience that Rick would really appreciate.
I love your analogy of conductor. That sounds in some ways invigorating. I mean, there's a challenge there in fitting all those pieces together,
I
right?
really didn't do anything specifically other than to try to make the pieces fit.
Mike, actually, in the long run, this assuming everything goes forward, a year ago there was some discussion of sort of an entertainment district or sports complex, and although that isn't specifically in this agreement for now, is there an eye towards, in the long view, that sort of entertainment district downtown, and particularly in the sports complex?
Yeah, not the long view, in the short view. I mean, the mayor was as interested in that as the stadium. The Jaguars are as interested in that as
So what would that look like?
I think that when this is finally done, we start dealing with the options and how do we get to where that becomes what everybody sort of is envisioning, visualizing as an entertainment district, again, going up the north into the out east neighborhood as well, and doing the things on the shipyard property. But it's coming. We'd be foolish if we didn't definitely make that happen, because that's what stadiums do now. They make opportunities all around. And it's much like the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl was very much the same way, lots of little pieces to a very big puzzle. So as a project, it was very similar to the Super Bowl.
You know, I want to talk about some of the future of Jacksonville when we look at the 2025 budget and beyond. Does this deal for the stadium renovation, does this impact, maybe in a negative way, what the city can do in the future? We know there are some big things coming up, including council looking at, hey, maybe we move the jail. There's $1 billion. Does this deal in any way hinder the city from going forward in some of those areas?
It doesn't change anything that could or would have happened. The only thing it does is it continues, as you move from your starter house to your bigger house, you have a bigger mortgage, but our operating budget will be bigger. And basically we will have more debt that we can afford. as opposed to less debt. But it's not going to affect any project that's already been basically authorized or projects that would have been authorized. It's basically a standalone. We're going to get a jail whether we do a stadium or not. And we're going to continue to remove septic tanks whether we get a stadium or not. We're just finishing negotiations with all the unions.
Right.
So the other things keep happening. But again, when you do your budget for your home, it's the same as doing it for basically government. It's a priority system. This was a top priority, but it's not really taking cash out of something that would have been done if we weren't doing the stadium. It's basically enlarging our debt portfolio as we pay off. So every year, basically, the goal is to pay off more debt than you take on, because every year we're paying off debt as well as taking on debt.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, you were a big part of the plan in the Curry administration on solving some of the pension issues. The police and fire pension fund was upside down and all of that. What about this idea that we're seeing? You just mentioned negotiations happening between the city and some of the unions right now. Maybe bringing back pensions, but that would be through the Florida retirement system, not necessarily the local. Do I have all that right?
I think that's what's been discussed for at least for public safety, some preliminary discussions on potentially getting a defined benefit plan through the state for public safety. Have you been a part of those discussions?
We can't do one locally. What's being discussed at the table is the possibility of allowing new public safety. I think it's just fire they're talking to sometime in the future, a couple years down the road, the option to join the state's FRS system, which would be a defined benefit program, but not run by the city, no city obligations other than to pay the employer's share of their pension each year. And that definitely is being discussed.
That would be an added cost for the city, though, right?
Pardon me?
That would be an added cost for the city, because currently...
Well, right now, for public safety, we put in 25% of their salary into their 501, basically deferred. So instead of putting money into their deferred account, we would be putting money into their pension. Now, it'll be a different amount, percentage-wise, but it'll be similar in structure. And instead of that person having a 401k or a deferred comp when they leave, they'll be in a defined benefit program. So we won't be doing both.
Right.
We won't be putting the 25 over here in deferred. We'll be using that and maybe some more to cover our share of their pension. But it'll again be for new people coming in.
You know, Mike, pretty remarkable. We've been CFO for 4 administrations, really remarkable. I don't know if anyone in Jacksonville history quite matches that. And I know you were very involved with the budget last year, less so this year because you're focused on the stadium deal. But as Ken has outlined, there are some sort of big ticket and big demands in the future, whether it's the jail, whether it's incentives downtown for downtown investment, whether it's infrastructure and septic tanks, whether it's more police officers on the street. As you look to the future and this budget, which I know you've been familiar with, at least generally, not as much this upcoming budget, but what do you see as the financial challenges for the city for the future?
Well, we definitely have financial challenges because we want to do a lot. We're very blessed to be in Florida. We're very blessed to be where we are. We're growing. So, I mean, some places around the country don't have a continued growth in revenue to us. We're not the most highly taxed area. We're one of the lowest in the state of major cities. So we do have financial challenges because of all that we want to do. But we're well equipped. We have good ratings. The New York, the rating agencies see us AA, AA plus, AA minus. So we're in good stead financially, but we do have challenges that we have to figure out one at a time. And when the jail pops up in 4 or 5 years, 6 years, we'll have to sit down and figure out how best to do that. A lot of jails are built where somebody else comes in and builds it, and you basically are a tenant. So you don't build it. You basically pay rent each and every year. So there are ways to do things besides just your regular typical mortgage when you want to buy a house. Right now, the housing market, they have rent now. The new houses go up and they say these houses are for rent. They're not for sale. Right. So you look at them one at a time, but we're lucky to be here. We have nice revenue flow, but we have lots of aspirations.
Yeah. I really appreciate it. We got lots of institutional knowledge here today with both of you, Mike Weinstein and Rick Mullaney. Thank you so much for going deep on this topic. I think it's really helpful for everybody who just starts at that high level. Oh, what's the stadium deal about? And then we went a little granular today. I appreciate it very, very much. And thank you so much for joining us for This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. New episodes drop every Thursday at 9 a.m. and you can always find them streaming online and on our streaming service, News4Jax Plus.